Hello and welcome. In this lecture, you will learn about the purpose of social work, why social workers do what we do, what kinds of roles do social workers play, what our primary purpose is, and the values that guide us as a profession. So let's get started. I'm going to open up our presentation. And here we go. So in generalist practice, an introduction to social work. So today we're going to talk about what is social work, the key aspects of social work, and various career paths that you might have in social work as a profession. So let's start first with what is social work. So obviously you've chosen to become a social worker, but if you are like I was when I first entered into my social work program, I didn't really understand the full scope of what we can do as professionals, what we can offer, what my career options were. So let's take a moment to look at what social work is. So first, I want you to take a little moment to reflect on what your own assumptions are about what social work is. So what do you think it is? What do you think social work is? If you were able to give it a definition, a one-liner, how would you define social work? Take a moment, get your notes, pen, and write down what you think social work is. The next thing I want you to think about is, what do you think it is social workers can do, right? So oftentimes I would experience that if someone said, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" And I say, "I'm a social worker." And the first thing that will come out of their mouth is, "Oh, it must be so hard to take people's children." And I would think to myself, well, actually, I've never worked with children. I've never removed a child from a family. So, I don't really know that it's that difficult for me because I've never done it, right? But folks have just their own assumptions about what it is that social workers can do. So what do you think it is that social workers can do? We do obviously work in child welfare, but in what other spaces? What other spaces? So take a moment, jot something down. What is it do you think that social workers can do? And so then as we move through this lecture, hopefully you'll get some new ideas. Maybe you'll get confirmation on some things that you thought, but we'll explore this profession that you've decided to join. So the purpose of social work, let me move my little head out of the way. Now, the National Association for Social Workers is our governing body, and they define social work as what you see here on the screen. This is really just the foundation of what it is that we do as professionals, what social work is purposed to do. So enhancing human well-being, to help meet basic human needs of all people. And here's the kicker. Here's where we start to distinguish ourselves from our other colleagues in the helping professions, because we pay particular attention to the needs and empowerment of people who are vulnerable, oppressed, and living in poverty. That's our thing. Those are the groups of folks that really get social workers charged up, right? So it's not just wanting to help. It's not just wanting to help meet people's needs, but with particular attention to those who are vulnerable, oppressed, and living in poverty. So this slide gives you an idea of some of the primary concerns that social workers tend to take on, helping people live meaningful and healthy, successful lives as determined by them, not necessarily determined by us. Help people obtain tangible things, food, water, shelter. So as you go through your MSW curriculum, you'll start to learn a lot about what theory tells us, a lot about what we know about the importance of meeting people's basic fundamental needs first, right? that it's going to be pretty difficult. Just think about yourselves, right? It's going to be pretty difficult for an instructor to say, hey, I want you paying attention in class. I want you to do all your assignments. I want you to take care of all your business, and you're hungry, right? Like you have food insecurities, right? Or you don't have a stable place to live. And you're sitting in class thinking about like, okay, well, where am I going to go tonight? And is my stuff safe? But yet I'm placing demands on you to, function at this high level as far as your role as a student. So we place a really high importance on helping to meet people's basic needs so that they can live well, right? Another purpose of social work is, or one of our central concerns, has to do with helping people obtain intangible resources, such as emotional and economic support, social support, right? So once your basic needs are met, right, and I'm able to work with a client, I'm making sure that they're not living on the streets, that they know where they can eat regularly. Well, now I can start talking to them about maybe some of the trauma that they've experienced and how can we work through some of the emotions that they might have because of those experiences. And then also, who are they in relationship with? Do they need to connect to family? What other social supports can we provide for them? So these are some of the primary concerns that social workers have. Let me move my little face around again so you can see a little bit better. Okay, so you'll hear quite often the term generalist practice, right? And what does generalist practice mean? Trying to wrap your minds around that. So this little graphic that you're seeing right above my head basically depicts this relationship between the various helping professionals that will fall under like behavioral health, right? So psychiatry, counseling, psychology. Think about folks, maybe friends that you have that are in MFT programs or other counseling sort of programs, and how it is in some ways we are similar. So that yellow section that you're seeing in the graph right there is like where a lot of our professions intersect, that maybe we all play some kind of counseling role, do direct practice, there's some overlap there. But for social workers, there's a uniqueness, and that's where you see all of that other part of the blue square, where we focus on many different problems, not just behavioral, mental, or emotional problems. We target the environment, right? So this is the beauty for me anyway. I'm very biased as a social worker of some of the things that we get to do, because we're not restricted to direct practice with individuals or families or groups and doing the counseling, and we're not restricted to that space. Although many of us do that. I am one, right? Spent a lot of my career doing direct practice, therapy, that sort of thing. But you're not restricted there, because one of the things as a generalist practitioner, we have the ability to also think about how can we improve folks' lives by working through school systems, right? By changing policy. You see the next point, advocacy. Okay. So it's one thing to have folks boots on the ground, working to help people. But we also need some folks making sure that there's some bills being passed where we can get some government funding to keep some of these clinics open that can pay my and your paycheck to help the people, right? In direct practice. Professional values and ethics, we have our own, as social workers, code of values and ethical standards that guide what we do as a profession. We place a lot of emphasis on partnering with folks, right? So I'm not the expert on your life. I can come into, your world and tell you what you need to do and how you should live, but I'm going to walk alongside you, and together, maybe I can help you figure out a way to live your best life, right? So a lot of partnerships. And so again, because we have this emphasis on oppressed and marginalized populations, we do place a big emphasis on diversity, marginalization, and oppression. So that doesn't mean that, you can't be a social worker that works in, Laguna somewhere, or, in very affluent areas and work in therapy with folks who, experience a lot of privilege. You certainly can, right? And you probably would make good money doing it. But as social workers, even in that space, we will be thinking about how positions of privilege or disadvantage or oppression impact our experience in the world, right? So everything is just within this context. But some of the things that make, as social workers, our hearts just, bleed are the experiences of folks who have been historically and currently marginalized and oppressed. Okay, let's talk about some key aspects of social work, right? This is just the beginning of a social work journey. And so some important things that you need to be able to file away, some language you need to start to learn, right? So getting hip with the vocabulary of social work. So values and ethics, let's start there because it's a big deal. These are the things that govern us, right? So, this would be, as a profession and as a vocation, this is like our Bible, that guides us. In the same way, for a Christian, the Bible is the word of God that reveals all truth and helps to kind of guide you in the direction that you should live your life. Our values and ethics from the code of ethics helps to guide us in the direction that we should go as a professional. So the NASW provides our core values. These are ones you're going to remember, right? And have to be able to rattle off really easily. Competence. Value number one. Competence is this idea that I need to know what the heck I'm talking about, right? I need to know what I'm doing. I need to receive adequate training. I shouldn't be, working outside of what you might hear as your scope of practice, right? I have an obligation as a professional to continue to grow, to continue to learn, to continue to hone my craft, to experience, to do anything that I can to become competent. This includes things around culture and diversity. So cultural competence is something that we pay a lot of attention to in our profession. This idea that I have an obligation, if I'm going to serve my population well, if I'm going to serve my clients well, to understand some about what their experiences are, to always be trying to learn and seek out knowledge. The other value for social workers is dignity and worth of a person, right? That we operate from a position that human beings inherently, because they are living and breathing, are deserving of dignity and worth, right? Now from a biblical standpoint, from a Christian worldview, this is like totally consistent with what Christians believe. Because the Bible tells us that we are made in God's image, that who God is in the character of God, he molded us and created us to reflect who he is. And so in that is in and of itself is enough to be able to substantiate this value that all persons deserve dignity and worth, right? That just because they're breathing. Now this gets real interesting for us practically, because that also then means that the perpetrator of child sexual abuse deserves dignity and worth, right? The individual who's been chronically homeless that is stinking up your entire office deserves dignity and worth, right? That all persons, regardless of their status, some of the things that they've done, they deserve dignity and worth, right? And so again, if you're looking at it from a Christian worldview, if I can find a way to view my brother and sister as a divinely created person in the image of God, then they deserve dignity and worth. The third is importance of human relationships, right? So a lot of the work that we do as social workers revolves around helping folks maintain, repair, establish healthy relationships with other people, okay? That we are not created to live in isolation. So again, if you're thinking about this in relation to a Christian worldview, God has created us to be in relation with one another. He created, the family. He's created community, right? He created Adam, and then he was like, it's not good for this man to be alone. So he created Eve, okay? So we are designed to be in relationship with other human beings. This gets more and more challenging in the day and age of such advanced technology, where folks are very easily isolated, and have all kinds of friends via social media, right? But are not in actual relationship with other human beings. So this is something that is a core value of ours that we really try to promote in all of the work that we do with our client systems. Integrity. So integrity is a core value that would suggest to me as a social worker that I need to conduct myself in a way that is honorable, right? Truthful, respectful, that I can interact with clients, with families, with administrators, with whomever my client system is, with other colleagues, right? In a way that displays integrity. Okay, so that's another value of ours. The fifth is service. We are a very service-oriented profession. One that, most social workers you meet, I wouldn't be surprised if they were on various, boards throughout the community, that your 9-to-5 job is not the only thing that you do as a social worker, right? You may have your 9-to-5 job with some fancy title of, clinical social worker 1, but then you're also volunteering at a local organization. You're also, right? So you're like never not a social worker. I hate to break it to you. If you thought you was getting into this game to just make quick money and just get a good job real quick, I'm sorry, right? Not really. So service to my community, service to my profession, service to my clients, right? Service in that I'm living a life that is in a position of giving, right? In a position of helping. Okay, last but certainly not least is social justice. So you will hear a lot about social justice in your time throughout your MSW program. This is something that really distinguishes us from many of our other helping professionals, is that we have an entire orientation around this idea of social justice, right? That there is something in I should be in a position of trying to create sort of a sense of fairness, right? A sense of equity, right? That as a Black person, I should be able to have the same opportunities as my white colleagues. As a female, I should be able to have access to the same opportunities as my male colleagues. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody will have the same outcomes, but we'll all have hopefully the same access, right? Now, there's still individual choice and all that plays into part that's going to determine what you do with the life that's given to you. But we all should be very aware that not everybody is given the same opportunity in life, right? And that at the core for a social worker is problematic, right? Problematic that we could have a system that says that my skin color, my gender, any of those factors could mean that I have inherently less opportunity in life than someone else, right? And so what we strive for as social workers is to create opportunities for dialogue, for legislation, for interventions that will promote social justice in the sense of equity. So theory is something else that's very important to us as social workers. And so we're going to take a look at just a few. Let me move my face for you again. Okay, just a few theories and principles that are really kind of guiding factors in our profession. So the strengths perspective, you'll hear a lot about the strengths perspective. Resiliency, this idea about resiliency, these sort of concepts in my mind go a bit hand in hand. This idea that instead of looking at people from their deficits, instead of looking at people from all the things that they cannot do, let's maybe put on these glasses from a strengths perspective and see maybe what are all the things that they're able to do, right? So thinking about some of the clients that we work with, maybe I have a client who, you know, comes into the agency, experiencing chronic depression, has like some suicidal ideation, you know, just doesn't know if she wants to live or not. But as we get to talking, so I could look at her just from this deficit perspective. Oh my goodness, her life is so horrible. You know, she's just so depressed. Or I could look at the fact that she just came into this agency for help. Like, whoa, where did that come from? How did you, with all your depression, muster up the strength to get in your car, drive down here, keep your appointment with me, sit here and share? Like, whoa, where did that come from? Right? You say something like that to a client, now you're operating in the strengths perspective. So yes, there are all kinds of problems with your life, client. Yes, I understand that. And we'll get there. But wow, how did you manage to do that, to get here, right? That must have taken a lot of strength, okay? Resiliency. This is strength amid adversity, right? So we look at individuals, communities, families from a perspective of resiliency, that there is so much that by the time you've encountered this family, this couple, this person, they've been through a lot, and yet they're still living, right? And yet they're still making it. That must tell me that they have somehow like rebounded from challenges that they've had in the past. What is it that kept them making it this far? This community that's been oppressed, just marginalized, experienced discrimination, but somehow they survived. How did that happen, right? Resiliency. We also think a lot about a fancy term, intersectionality of diverse factors. So intersectionality talks about the fact that, yes, I'm a Black person, and yes, I'm a woman, but there's also something unique about being a Black woman, right, together, right? Where those two things intersect just like that. Dimensions of diversity, you're just going to hear diversity a whole lot around here, right? So if it makes you uncomfortable, you'll be fine. Just get on over it, right? A lot of diversity. The potential for discrimination and oppression, cultural competence. So let's watch a quick video that will help describe some of these things. Okay, let me get this video. Where'd it go? Let me pause for technical difficulties. Let me get your, let's get this video playing. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. So this is talking about a strength-based approach. Let's just take a watch.
So I think we understand so much more about science of what makes people happy now. And what I have observed initial interaction with mum has been that they're often about what is about, what her, what illness she has, what diagnosis she has, what label she has, and then and I would much rather that people were building off her strengths, understanding her joy, talking to her about joy. So part of positive aging, people having the skills to interact with each other in ways that are active, appreciative, and constructive, and focus on joy, interest, repetitive scoring. Things we can do both, optimizing what works rather than fussing about things that perhaps aren't flexible or strong. So that part what the benefit skills to interact positively with each other. That's really important, not just for the person at the heart of aging. The person is perhaps an elder who's experiencing perhaps some kind of change what they were able to do before. But it's also really important for their carers, the people around them, whether they are formal professional therapists, physiotherapists, chiropodists, whatever, but also their families, their friends, and like
Okay. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of what, from a strengths perspective, what that might look like working with a client. So let's go back to, where do we end up here? Theories. Okay. So we don't just like to think about things theoretically, like just floating in the sky, right? No knock on my sociologists or anything like that, but there are other professions like sociology where they focus on really understanding how things work, right? Being able to theorize and come up with a good understanding about human behavior, about society, about how things work. So as social workers, we are, I would consider us more of a acting profession. So that we have, we take the theory and we actually translate it into practice. So what does that look like? So social work requires knowledge of human behavior and development. You will get that in your human behavior in the social environment class, right? Also social, economic, cultural institutions. You'll hear a lot of that in your marginalized populations class and how all of these things interact. The social work perspective emphasizes, again, resilience, strength, social justice, person and environment, sustainable communities. Sorry, my phone's ringing in the background. I hope that's not too distracting. Evidence-based practice is something that we value. So there's been a movement in the last many years around evidence-based practice, which really focuses on, we can't say something works just because it feels good. You may be, in a therapeutic relationship with a client, working with these clients. Every day they're better and better. They're coming in telling you about like, oh my goodness, my life is so much better. Thank you. The work that we've been doing works so much. That is not evidence necessarily, right? That whatever you have been doing with them is effective, right? It may have felt good. That may be just anecdotal evidence, but as a profession, we need to know that the interventions, that the strategies that we use with individuals, families, and communities are actually grounded in scientific evidence, right? So selecting an intervention for an issue, a problem, or anything like that, that's based on the results of research. And by research, we don't just mean like, oh, I did a little wiki thing, I Googled some stuff. That's not research, right? We use that term just in everyday language, but that's not considered research. Research is the systematic investigation. Research, or when you go, is what you read when you look at articles from peer-reviewed journals where someone did a randomized controlled trial of something, where somebody actually did collected qualitative data to analyze the impact of X, Y, or Z, right? Actual scientific research. So we rely on interventions like maybe cognitive behavioral therapy that we know has solid scientific evidence that it works. So then as a social work practitioner, if you decide, oh, I want to use cognitive behavioral therapy with this client, you know that there's grounded in some evidence that that is going to work, right? That that should work, not just winging it because another colleague told you, oh yeah, I did this thing once and it worked with my client, okay? So the generalist intervention model, you just got memorize it. Memorize it. You're just going to live with this thing for the next 2 years and beyond. You know, it'll be like a blanket. It'll keep you warm, right? Your generalist intervention model. Everything that you talk about, do, see over the next 2 years at least is going to be grounded in this generalist intervention model. Should I say it one more time? Generalist intervention model, right? That's where you're going to live. So there are 7 steps to the model. This is the foundation to how we practice as social workers. It does not matter if you're working with, you know, children in a preschool, if you're working with, you know, one teenager at the high school, if you're working with the adult who's incarcerated, if you're working with a family, if you're working with a whole agency and all of their staff, it does not matter who your client is. And in social work, we work with a range of client systems. This is your model. It doesn't matter if you think you're going to be macro and work in direct practice, or if you're going to be micro and work in, you know, the governor's office. This is your model, right? Step 1 is engagement. This is the stuff that we do to educate clients about what this interaction is that they're going to have with us and get them to buy in. They got to buy into it. The next step is assessment. Before you can start figuring out what you're going to do with a client, you need to first figure out what's going on with the client. Assessment, it's a whole phase of treatment. After you assess is then when you and the client together can start planning. Okay, so what's going to happen to get you where you want to go? After engagement and assessment and planning, then it's implementation. So that is where the intervention, like the work, starts happening, right? So that's where, okay, well now we're, you know, therapy, maybe that's the best route. Maybe I'm going to do a solution-focused therapy, right? Or you know, now that I've done a needs assessment with my community, now is and we've come up with a plan on what the community's goals are and how they want to achieve their goals. Now I can start implementing an intervention with them. The 5th step is evaluation, right? So after you've gone through this course of treatment or intervention with whatever your client system is, you need to find out is what we did together. Did what we do together work, right? Was it effective, right? So I have to evaluate somehow if what we've done together actually worked. And then the last few phases are termination and follow-up. So this is essentially the flow that no matter how brief your interaction is, no matter if you're working with a client for 2 hours, you're going to do the GIM in 2 hours. You're going to quickly engage them, assess them, make a plan, intervene, evaluate if it worked, terminate in 2 hours, right? It doesn't matter if you're working with a client for 2 months. Maybe you'll be working in a school setting where you have an entire semester to work with a group of students. You're going to be doing the GIM over a semester. Maybe you're working with a community over an entire school year, right? You're going to be doing your GIM over the entire school year, okay? Maybe you're in a crisis sort of setting where you only have, you know, maybe 30 minutes with any given client. You better figure out how you're going to GIM in 30 minutes, right? No matter what the context, the population, the setting, the system, generalist intervention model, that is your friend. And that's how we operate as social workers in practice. This is just another visual for you. You can go ahead and save this so you can remember the flow, the steps. You'll get yourself caught up every time if you don't follow the steps. Follow the process, right? If you think a client is coming in and they're distracted, oh my goodness, let me start doing interventions real quick. Yeah, you can start doing interventions and then find out you were intervening on the wrong thing, right? You'll find out that you wasted the last, 2 weeks with this client because you were helping them work on stuff that was not even a priority for them because you didn't adequately engage, assess, and come up with a plan before you started doing a bunch of work. Okay? So do not neglect the process. So lastly, we'll just talk a little bit about careers in social work, what some of your options might be now that you've entered into this journey, to give you an idea of what might be available to you. Okay, so let's get this video to work. Let's get this video to work real quick. Let me let my commercial finish playing, and then let's see if I can get you on the video. Okay, we're gonna just skip that ad and take a look.
I love my job because I get to help people every day. I work at the State House. I wanted to go into government and learn how the system works so that I could change it for the people who need it most. I specialize in geriatrics, which is with older adults. I think that's definitely the best part of my job when I'm able to just kind of watch and observe our senior in action.
I feel like children are our future, and by working with the families and the children, it really lets me give back and help our future.
Thing that I didn't realize when I was in high school or college and thinking about the choice was just how tremendously flexible social work can be. When I need to change my hours, I ask myself because I'm the boss, and I can really direct and guide my practice as I see fit.
My role here is to be a social worker in the high school. Kids have a lot of things that are going through their heads and issues that come up for them that really need to be addressed in some way. And that's why having a social worker right in the school, someone they can hopefully develop a trusting relationship with, is crucial to helping them get through their day and continue on their path.
People can work in schools and hospitals, and policy and law, where human beings are involved and advocacy and change. There's a place for social work. I'm Jennifer Gallant-Taylor. How are you? And I'm a social worker at Children's Hospital Boston in the Parents program. We work with teen parents 18 years and under. They can come for their medical care. They can come for any mental or social health needs they may have, and try to make a healthy family. What intrigued me about social work when I first looked into it was, I think, working with people. You're working with mental health, you're working with families, trying to find the solutions to problems. And I get to do that as a social worker every day. So a typical day is have meetings with our team, and then once patients start coming in, then it just depends what they bring every day. One day we can be dealing with someone who's homeless by 5 o'clock that night, and we have to help them find somewhere to live. A couple weeks ago had a mom who found out her son had cancer, and so it was working with her on getting to all the appropriate care and working with the family together on hearing that really tough news. I work with an awesome team of people. We all come from diverse backgrounds, and we all bring our strengths into this clinic, and we all have different ways of working with people too.
Being a social worker really gives me an opportunity to build relationships with families, with clients, individuals that I think I get a lot out of.
Naturally working with families for 3 or 4 years, I get to be a part of the negative times as well as the positive times, and I think what's powerful for them is that I've stayed with them during all of that. When you are a social worker, you're looking at the whole picture. So you're looking at the families, you're looking at their schools, you're looking at the whole system that makes this person live. And I like that about social work. The sad stories that you meet here, that can be challenging at times. Formula, but I think when I'm able to impact one family at a time, and when I hear from a family 5 years later that differently now that I have my social work degree. I look at problems differently. I look at people differently. I look at the culture and society differently. And I see everything through a social work lens, which I really appreciate.
I get to do myself and learn about myself, yet I'm still making the world a better place.
I've always been a big fan of superheroes. The thing that's always drawn me to them is that they help without any sense of homework. It's not about the fame, it's not about the fortune, it's about helping others. And I guess social work has always been my way.
What I like best about being a social worker is being that vessel of change and empowering others to empower themselves. As a social worker, I'm able to do that, and it's truly a gift.
For me, that's the reward of a career in social work more than the other. It's about the lives that you've transformed or touched or impacted in a positive way.
To learn more about social work education or a social work career, please contact the National Association of.
Okay, so that was, I think, a nice little video, just give you a snapshot of what the various careers that are available to you in social work. So I'll tell you, one of the things that I was so happy to find out about my choice to become a social worker is how flexible it was. Because if you are the sort of person like me that has a difficult time committing to anything for a very long time, I was just very excited to find out, like, oh wow, I can get one degree and then do something and then change my mind and then maybe do something else and then change my mind. Or, you know, I already knew I wanted to get into social work, but not exactly ready to commit at all of, like, and you know, I don't know, 22 years old, like, for what I was going to do for the rest of my life. So social work gives you the opportunity to get a really wide a breadth of training in various things as a generalist practitioner, that then throughout your career you can decide to take it in one direction or the other. Okay, so here are some of the professional roles that we play as generalist practitioners. So everything from a counselor, right, to a facilitator. We do a lot of advocating. You'll find yourself educating people a lot on different things. A case manager, right? So even once I got to the place of having my MSW and I'm a clinical social worker 1, you know, guess what? I'm still a case manager 2. So my client comes in and again, you know, they're struggling with their income. They don't even know if they're going to be able to pay their rent. Well, we can't just process emotions about paying their rent. We're also going to get on the computer and complete that SSI application, right? So you'll be skilled to be able to do all of that. Complete the SSI application, educate them about what their opportunities are as far as stabilizing their finances. You can also be their counselor and help them process through the stress of being insecure in their financial situation. But you can also mediate with them when they're having a hard time getting that application process and they don't really know how to communicate to the workers at DPSS to maybe fulfill a mediating role and coach them around what to say to get their application processed successfully. So you'll just be, you're kind of everything. You're kind of everything. And so again, it's a wonderful thing to be able to have so many options, all fall under one degree. You'll also be able to practice in multiple settings, right? So not just fulfilling multiple roles, but multiple settings. So the clip you just watched showed some social workers working in a hospital setting, social worker working in a school setting, but there are many, many options for us. Medical facilities. So especially in the Inland Empire, there's an increasing need for social workers that can practice in different medical settings. This is especially true for our geriatric population. So everything from hospice to nursing homes to hospitals, medical facilities is a good place for social workers. Government agencies, different nonprofits, right? Be it, you know, different organizations to promote health and wellness for children, to all just kinds of nonprofit agencies, agencies that address issues around domestic violence, corrections facilities. So many social workers thankfully, are working in settings with justice involved individuals, either directly in the jails or the prison system, or in capacities with folks who are living in the community but are still justice involved. So those who are on probation and parole. Home health and long-term care settings is a place for social workers. State and federal government is a good place for social workers. And schools, there's social workers placed in the schools. Students have various needs that will impact their ability to learn. And so many school districts have got on board with the fact that they need social workers to help them to address so many of the things that they see going on with students that prevent them from really excelling in the classroom. Community-based mental health agencies, this is personally what my background is in, doing community-based mental health, so working with folks with severe and persistent mental illnesses, but in a way where we want to reduce their chances of being hospitalized or institutionalized and increase their chances of living in the community with natural supports, with families, and being well. Faith-based organizations, so social workers in churches, right? So congregational social work is one of the things that here at CBU we're really excited about and are promoting quite a bit. And it takes a lot of education on both sides for social workers to understand, absolutely, we can thrive and function well in church-based settings, but also for pastors and clergy to really see the benefit of having social workers involved to help communities, congregants be able to manage all of the various things that they're dealing with that affect their lives. Military and veterans programs. So, our service members, their families, and veterans can benefit from the services social workers provide, both on like the case management resourcing side, as well as the counseling side. And then at a macro level, right, on a larger kind of agency level, social workers really can play a part in advocating for the rights of veterans and their family, particularly around things like healthcare and access to mental health services. And private practice. So if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, you can also be your own boss as a social worker, right? So the MSW is a terminal degree in our field. And should you choose to want to do clinical practice, you can pursue a licensure as a licensed clinical social worker and be able to open up your own practice and be your own boss. Even if you don't want to do direct practice and clinical work, you could be your own boss and do private practice perhaps as a consultant. So to organizations who need diversity trainings, or to agencies that need a grant writer, or help them with fund development. Social workers can do that too. So private practice is definitely an option. So that concludes this lecture as an introduction to social work. There's a few things hopefully you've taken away from this lecture that you'll be able to reflect into any assignments and discussion posts that your instructor has for you. That our profession has certain core values that guide us, that a big focus for us is on improving the well-being of folks' lives, but particularly those who are marginalized and oppressed, right? A big focus on diversity. We're guided by a code of ethics by the National Association of Social Workers that gives us professional and ethical standards, and also theory informed that really guides our practice in the interventions that we choose to practice. Now, do not forget the thing that you're going to have to know for the rest of your career now: the Generalist Intervention Model, the GIM. Write it down. Take a picture. Put it on your phone, right? The Generalist Intervention Model. You're going to have to get to the point where you can rattle it off like that. How many steps are there in the Generalist Intervention Model? How many steps? You better know it. I hope your instructor quizzes you on it. Those steps flow in a certain order, right? And that is the guiding framework for all of the work that we do in practice, no matter what practice level you're working at, no matter what population or setting. The Generalist Intervention Model is your guide. It is your friend. If you think you're going to forget it, put it in your phone, write it down, keep it in your pocket. The Generalist Intervention Model. There are also many, many career options. So you've made an excellent choice. The field is wide open for you. And I hope that as you continue throughout your education in the program and continue to participate in lectures in your classes, you'll take every opportunity to just digest the information so that you can start to figure out what your path in this profession is so that you can live out your purpose. It's right there, right there on the screen. Live your purpose. And so it's such a blessing for us, though, to have the opportunity to live out our God-given purpose and the calling that God has placed on your life through your vocation, right? Like to be able to have a job, to get paid, to do what you really feel that God has called you to do anyway, right? That you would do it for free, but He doesn't make you do it for free. Instead, He gives you the opportunity to turn it into a career and get paid to do it. So that is such a blessing. So that concludes this lecture. Take care, and I'll see you next time.